Today it's just you, me, a cup of tea and the questions. Hi everyone, welcome back to a new video. Today I thought I'd do my very first ever Q&A video. So I reached out on Instagram and I asked everybody to leave me a question. So I've got a list of questions here. I put them in the notes section on my phone. I've got 16 questions that I would like to go through with you today. So while I've looked at the questions, I have not pre-prepared answers. So we shall see how we go with that. Thank you to everybody who left me a question. Question number 1, how long have you been teaching? That's easy and not easy to answer because I graduated in 1995. So I started teaching in 1996. But then I had time off with my children. For each child I had 1 year off, and then when I went back to work, I went back part-time. So I just say that I've been teaching for over 20 years because it's just easier that way. Question number 2, if you didn't teach English, what would you teach? It's hard for me after teaching that long to think about what I would teach other than English. I can't imagine anything else. I don't know. Maybe something like, oh look, I don't know. I could probably do drama, but I'd get a bit tired of all the dramatics after a while. I could probably, I'm a qualified history teacher, so I would teach history. I love history, so that's a natural answer, natural choice. Number 3, do you have all of winter off? No, I don't have all of winter off. We have 2 weeks off in winter. And as you know, I'm Australian, so our winter falls in the middle of the year, which is still a shock for some people. But yes, it falls in the middle of the year. And we just have 2 weeks off then. We have our big break later. Number 4, what are your summer months in Australia? So in Australia, we have spring from September. So we go September, October, November for spring. And then summer is December, January, February. So it's just 3 months for each season. Any advice for a first year English teacher? Yes, I have loads of advice for a first year English teacher. The first thing is feel free to say no. Don't burn yourself out in the first year. The first year will be a lot of work, a lot of adjustments, but look after yourself, align yourself with a mentor. And I actually have a video about this. Not necessarily for English teachers, but first year teachers in general. I have a video which I'll link up here. But English teachers have a lot of reading to do and a lot of marking to do. Just look after yourself, have a support network around you, and don't feel like every lesson has to be amazing, because it doesn't. It's okay to have a structured, predictable, solid lesson. And in fact, I think it's good to have most of your lessons like that and save the big wow lessons for just every now and then. Okay, number 6. What are your favourite strategies for work-life balance? Okay, this is a big topic. Like, I could actually make a whole video about this, I think. I think I should. I've made a couple of videos about stress, but work-life balance, I get asked about this a lot. So, first of all, I have an issue with the term balance. I think balance makes you think that everything has to be even, like work has to have the even amount of time, the same amount of time as home life, and that's just not possible, especially in our job. So I think a better approach would be to think of it as fulfillment. So you can get enough fulfillment at work and enough fulfillment at home. And when you think of it like that, you kind of can then juggle things a little bit better, and you can feel yourself starting to become dissatisfied at work or at home, and you make the adjustments. And I think it's a continual adjustment throughout time. And as seasons of life change as well, your needs and your wants and your pressures change as well. So I think it's really important to be mindful of that. But watch this space, because I think I'll make a video on that, because it's like a massive topic and really important. Number 7, how do you recommend teaching organisation to high school students? Oh man, kids are so disorganised, aren't they? It's hard. I think, an as-you-go approach, and I try to model good organisation, and I'm very explicit regarding how I want things done. And especially the younger years, my year 7s, 8s, that kind of age group, but all the way up, I say, if I want things done in a certain way, I tell them. Meeting deadlines is always going to be an issue for kids of all ages, I think, and so Google Classroom is a massive help with that. I think I've become a little bit more understanding since I've become a mother of how difficult it is for kids to do stuff, communicate with parents, especially parents of your students who have some kind of special needs or some learning difficulties. Email them and tell them what's coming up and what needs to be done. And also try to do as much in-class work as you can, and a lot of formative assessment. Loads of formative assessment, so that you don't get bitten at the end when you have to collect all of your data and those kids who just can't organise themselves haven't handed everything in. I hope that helps. So number 8's a little bit like the other question before. So number 8 says, is work-life balance a myth? I think it kind of is. And you know, there's times in your life when you have a lot of work, especially as an English teacher, that you have to bring home. And I just accept that it's a season, that it'll only last for X number of weeks, and I just have to embrace it. And at those times, my house is going to be messy, and like it is now, and it doesn't matter. You know, so I think the perception that everything has to be like this and that everything's going to be even and equal and fair, I just think you have to have flexibility in your mindset and flexibility in your understanding of how time works and how your devotion and fulfillment of each of the categories of your life works. What expectations do you have, and how do you let students know this at the start of the lesson? I just tell them what I expect. I'm not backwards in coming forwards. And I tell them, this is what you have to do. This is when you have to do it. And if you can't do that, there'll be a consequence. And also the expectations are for me as well. Like, you've got to understand that these are just kids and that they're going to fail and they're going to struggle to meet your expectations. So you've got to give some grace, but you've got to just also be explicit, and you've got to support them in getting them where you want them to be. So yeah, I just say it, and I also have it up on my wall. Some of my routines are written up on my wall, and I just point to them, and I have to remind them, and I have to nag them, and I have to remind them. It's just continual all the time. So know which things you just will not allow, and draw the line, and make sure that you're willing to follow up on consequences if they don't follow those certain expectations. It's just, to me, it's simple. You know, you're going to make your own life easier if you have certain expectations in the classroom, and you're going to make your life harder if you just let kids do whatever they want. Number 10, how do you stay consistent posting on Instagram? It's really hard. I love Instagram. It's probably my favorite social media, and it's really hard as a teacher because you're so busy, and as a mother to have time. And more importantly than time is the mental space for it. So but it brings me so much joy. It's so much fun. I love Instagram. So I only commit to 5 days a week. And even then, if I don't make the 5, then that's okay. I forgive myself. And I just try to post, as in with Insta stories, I try to do that at certain times every day. So like in the morning, in the middle, in the afternoon. And that way there's a sense of consistency about it. You won't realise this, but I had to stop filming because my camera went flat, so I had to go and charge it. Anyway, I'm back, and I've still got my cup of tea, which I've hardly had any of. So we're up to I'm still continuing with question 10 about Instagram. So the other thing about consistency is I have a little formula that I use for myself for my Insta stories. Insta stories are my most favorite thing to do. They're so much fun because you film little things, take photos of little things, you put stickers and GIFs and text and all sorts of things. I just love it so much, and it's sort of instant, and you get feedback, you're interacting with your viewers, and I just love it so much. So I'm pretty committed to the Insta stories 5 days a week. But if I can't do some, I forgive myself. I don't get all uptight about it. But I have a little formula of the types of things that I do each time. And I did make a little video about it, which I'll put up here if you're interested in finding out more about Instagram. Because I find it fun. I don't think, it's not a drag for me to do Instagram. But I do have a break. Usually on the weekend, I have a break from Instagram. Okay, so do you ever regret not being a primary school teacher? Nope. I don't. Like I started to say before, I actually did 2 years of primary teaching when I lived out west in Cobar. The reason for that was that I followed my husband. My husband was a targeted grad, we used to call them back then. So it meant he got a job, he got a permanent job. And even though I had already graduated before him, so I casually taught while I was there, and I got loads of work in the local primary school and a little bit in the high school, but not as much. So what happened was they just asked me to do a block and then another block and then another block, and I just ended up being there for 2 years. I was really good with the year 6 kids because I was high school trained and I had experience in high school, so I ended up on the upper grades, and I really enjoyed it. And back in those days, I'm not sure what the situation is now, but you got you could get your principal to sign off after 2 years and you had an instant qualification to teach primary. So I'm actually qualified to teach primary as well because of that. But then at the end of the 2 years, or just maybe it was the following year, I got a call. I got an employment call for the local high school. So I got my permanent employment, and it's just because of the fact that there was a vacancy. My name was down. I had added the primary schools to my list, but the vacancy was at the high school. They offered it to me. The department offered it to me, and I said yes, of course. I said yes. So ever since then, I've been permanently employed as a high school teacher, and I won't go back now, even though I did enjoy it. Yeah, I like the teenagers too much. I like how they're a bit sassy and they're finding their way and don't have a mask yet. I don't know. I like teenagers, so that's where I will stay. 12. How do you plan out your units and get ready for a new term? Okay, so I actually did a video on this at the start of this term, which I'll put up here. And so I usually start with the scope and sequence that my faculty has put together, and then I look at, I think about my classes and I look at the topics that they need to do, and I just plan out what activities I think will be beneficial for my particular students. I look again at the outcomes to make sure everything is fine and matching, and I try to take, especially now our deputy's been taking us through the UBD framework, and so now I really try to think about the concept before I start teaching and assessment, and then map everything out. But you will see in the video how I sort of brainstorm everything and put it all together if you're interested in looking at that. What advice can you give about making whole class novel units engaging? Anytime a kid reads a book and engages in a book is a good time. Okay, it's fantastic. But rather than doing just straight read a book, show me that you understand it, we now frame our units on more of a concept, like I just said before, and very closely linked to the learning outcomes. We have outcomes, I think in America they're called standards, I'm not sure. So there's got to always be a purpose, focus, whether that's a thematic focus, which we don't tend to do in my particular neck of the woods, or a conceptual focus, or a focus on a language feature that you're trying to get the kids to understand. Then you would focus on that particular language feature. The other thing is that kids these days don't read like we used to read. So there's a very different, I have found anyway in my context, there's a very different mindset around reading, and it is super, super hard to get kids to read a novel. And I think that's becoming widespread. I'm not saying I agree with it, disagree with it. I just think that that's the way it is. And I think that as teachers, we need to accept the fact that kids aren't reading books like they used to. We want them to. It's good when they do. But I have found, because I work in a very low socioeconomic area, so for my particular situation, I've found that teaching extracts, teaching short stories, hits the mark of teaching all of those narrative elements that you want the kids to understand and to learn about. Having said that though, I always get the kids to read a book every year at least, because I think it's really, I know that they're not reading at home, so to my way of thinking, at least they will read with me in class. Sometimes, depending on the ability level of the class and where they're at, I read the book to them. Or I use my Audible app on my phone, and we read it through Audible because I really want them to have that experience. To make it engaging, I think it gets a bit dry when you take the approach of we're going to read this book and then you're going to answer these comprehension questions. And while that is legitimate to a degree, that can get a bit repetitive and too dry for the kids. So I always try to have, like I said before, a conceptual focus or a particular language feature that you want them to learn about. You know, what are you actually teaching them apart from being literate, which is really important? What are you teaching them about language and how meaning is shaped? And just show them the joy of being able to read a book and ignite that sort of passion about reading. Talk to them about what you're reading, keep it relevant, keep it interesting, try to link it to their everyday activities and make it relevant to them where they are, and choose books well, choose books that they're going to appreciate, learn something from and relate to at the same time. It's a big question, that one, so maybe I should make a video about that too. I don't know. Okay, number 14. What was the hardest time you've had doing the teacher mum juggle? I'm still doing it. I've got an 18-year-old, a 15-year-old, and a 12-year-old. So yeah, man, I'm still juggling. It's a lot more difficult when they're younger, of course. The hardest thing, oh man, I could tell you so many stories. It's hard. It's hard doing 2 full-time jobs at once. It's really hard. But you know what? Anything that's worthwhile is hard work. So you have to accept that and embrace that and rejoice in that, because it's a wonderful thing to be able to be a mum and to be a teacher. Imagine all the lives that you're influencing. So it, yeah, it's a juggle. I've had, I'm not very good at housework. I say no to a lot of social events. I'm not very social. I think I'm good at accepting where I am and embracing what that is for this season in my life. And it's good. You can always find something good about every place that you're at, and know your limitations and know when you need to say no and when you need to stop. And you can't do it all at once, okay? You can have a life that's full where you do it all over your lifetime. But in this season of your life, when your kids are young, maybe you can't do it all at once, and that's okay, it's totally fine. I've got text coming through. Should have put this on airplane mode. Okay, which means my family's coming home soon, so I better hurry up and film this video, because otherwise there's going to be chaos everywhere and I won't be able to film properly. Just on that, before I leave, question 14 is, I have my son. I'm also an Asperger's parent. My son has Asperger's syndrome, so that's a whole extra bit of stuff in your life. And I think that's taught me to just sort of accept reality and to just find the humor in stuff and just laugh your way through. Because otherwise, what's the alternative? Get some mum friends too and have a bit of a laugh with them. Number 15, how do you deal with irrational colleagues and incompetent upline asking for a friend? Okay, I have experienced this before in my life. So, irrational colleagues are often people who are quite insecure and who need a lot of support. So I try to show kindness where I can, for as long as I can before I lose it. In different times and different areas of my life, I've always had mentors. I always seek out people with whom my values align, and I talk with them and I ask their advice on how to deal with different people. So yeah, ask people, be supportive, be kind, try to see things from their perspective. And they're often struggling with something, or they're very insecure themselves, or they might be jealous of you. That happens a lot. People are jealous of you and they don't know how to deal with you, so they just lash out and do crazy stuff. If it's too much for you to handle and you don't have enough people to talk to, or you don't have the right people to talk to about it, stay away from them as much as is possible, as humanly possible. I mean, go to the library to do your work. Find an excuse to walk out of the staff room so you can take a few deep breaths. Have a mental health day when you need to. You've got to look after yourself, and you've got to make sure that this is your job, and you've got to be able to survive it somehow. And if all else fails, I know in the Department of Education go the complaints route if you want to, but I would leave that to the last resort. Incompetent upline is a tricky one. I think that if you feel that they're incompetent, there will be others at your school who feels that they're incompetent. They again may need some support. There may be parts of their job they don't know how to do. So you might find it beneficial to have a chat with their supervisor and take the approach of, look, I think they're struggling. How do you suggest I can support them in their role without burning out myself? And they'll probably come up with some great strategies that you can use. Asking for a friend. Yep. It happens a lot. And number 16, how can someone reignite their passion for teaching? This is a good one. Like I said before, I think there's seasons in life when your interests are sort of a little bit more elsewhere, especially when you have little babies or, whatever. I wanted to be a teacher since I was 10 years old, so I've never really lost my passion for teaching. But then again, I'd like to address the word passion. I don't know that this is something that you have to be passionate about all the time, but you certainly have to have a heart for it. And I think that if you have legitimately lost your heart for teaching, I think you probably should look at other avenues of sources of income, because Is it really fair on the students if you have legitimately lost your heart for making them be able to be competent in the world, to be able to learn, to be able to interact with other humans, to be responsible citizens, to enjoy literature, to be informed, you know, all of those things. If you don't have a heart for those things, then you probably shouldn't be in education. So that's my advice for that one. So this kind of turned into a bit of a agony aunt type of column online. I didn't mean for that to happen, but let me know what you thought of the Q&A style video, and maybe I'll make another one. I don't know. If you have questions for me, more questions, further questions, put them in the comments underneath here. And if you liked this video, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I've got a few new subscribers that came in a bit of a cluster, which was pretty cool. So welcome all of the new people. Thanks for joining me. If you're not subscribed, do yourself a favor and subscribe now, because it's loads of fun here. Don't forget, my advice to you is to teach well, live well, and be well. And here are some videos over here for you to watch later if you'd like to. Thanks for watching.